wanted to give my system an upgrade. I went to go check on it at night. It was icy, freezing rain. It was really gross. And I was wondering if I could even find my way back to where I'd tapped the tree. I'd done it off the beaten path so it wouldn't disturb anybody or nobody would get into it. And I had yet to go find it in the dark at night. Thankfully, I was able to find it, found everything intact. Nobody had messed with anything. No animals had got into anything. I just had to scrape all the frozen leaves off the top of it before I could get into it and see how much sap was there. I was able to shake it and tell that there was a good amount of liquid, maybe a half an inch. It had only been there for 24 hours, so I wasn't expecting very much. I wanted to upgrade the system the next day, so I went to the local hardware store to pick up a couple of supplies. I needed two things specifically. I needed a T-pipe to connect the piece of pipe that I was splicing into what was already existing, and then I just needed another brass tap to put in the tree. Back in the woods, I brought a drill and the hardware that I just bought and a little extra piece of hose. The reason why I wanted to add an additional tap is because you can get twice the amount of sap from the tree as with just one. Now, it's not as efficient if you stick them closer together, especially if they're right on top of each other. Since sap flows up and down, it's kind of like taking water from the same pipe. But if you stagger them across the circumference of the tree, then you're effectively tapping twice as much. This is all experimental, as so much of what I do is. I'm not an expert tree tapper. I'm not an expert at making maple syrup, but I just like experimenting and seeing if I can get things to work. Here I was making sure that liquid could flow all the way into the bucket from that second tap, because I didn't want it to have to run uphill through that little piece of pipe. Anyway, I went back to check on it the next night, and it was a lot warmer. It was probably about 55 degrees as opposed to the freezing rain, and ants had found their way to the little tap holes that I'd put in the tree. It was interesting. I was wondering if they got inside, but after I took the lid off the bucket and transferred the contents, I saw that it was a pretty closed system, which I was thankful for. So there was only a little bit of debris in the sap that I'd collected. You can see there's quite a bit. It wasn't by any means a whole bucket, but it did pretty well for a couple of nights. So I transferred the sap back to the old homestead, aka my apartment, and then I was ready to measure it. So I got a clean glass bowl with a lid. There's my sap, and there's a measuring cup. I wanted to measure how much that I collected so I could keep track of the amount of sap that I bring in this week. I ended up collecting a little over a half a gallon, which was pretty impressive. Then I wanted to strain all of the little bits of crud out. You know, there's like little pieces of bark or stuff like that. So I just ran it through a coffee filter. That worked really well. The sap flowed easily through it, but there were some little bits and pieces of debris that were still trapped in the filter when I was done. After I finished straining, I put a lid on it and I stuck it in the fridge. I'll go back to the woods in a couple of days to see how we've done. It's going to freeze and thaw a couple more times before then, so hopefully we'll get some more sap.